Welcome to episode 19 of the Some Kind of Mystic podcast, where we bridge the mystical and spiritual with the fun and amazing blessing of an adventure of being authentically human. I'm your host, Jessie Herman, and today's episode is a really exciting one for me because I got to share an amazing conversation with one of my very first lifelong friends, Jenny Tryansky. Jenny spent the first part of her life caring too much about other people's opinions and expectations, and in doing so, she lost touch with her intuition and inner sense of guidance. Her journey to reconnect with these internal cues led her significant life transformations as she approached 40. Leaving behind a successful career in the Canadian television industry, Jenny bravely transitioned to become a certified professional coach. Jenny tells her story about how her work eventually felt disconnected and misaligned with her true self. Realizing that she wasn't living authentically, she made the conscious choice to face her fears and pursue her dreams. Jenny's path was not easy. She confronted self-doubt, discomfort, internal struggle, but she persisted, and she was driven by the understanding that her old career didn't resonate anymore with her values or her purpose. She stopped the self-criticism, the imposter syndrome, the perfectionism, and any issues she had left with self-worth. Eventually, she figured out how to befriend herself. Jenny is now a life coach, helping individuals gain the resources and strategies that they need to motivate them from a place of compassion rather than oppression. Join us as Jenny shares her powerful story of transformation, the lessons she learned along the way, and how she helps others to live their most fulfilling lives. It's an amazing conversation about facing fears, embracing authenticity, and the continuous journey of befriending oneself. Get ready to be inspired by Jenny Tryansky on this episode of Some Kind of Mystic. Welcome, Jenny, to the Some Kind of Mystic podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. It is amazing to catch up and to see you. How are you doing today?
I'm very excited to be with you. You were one of my first ever friends in my life.
Yes, that is true. In fact, I was there waiting for you, even before you were born. You're born a little bit later in the month, and same year, same neighborhood, same everything. So we were literally newborns together. Our parents are friends and came into this world in one of those situations where, you can't bump into anyone by accident. And then we were, really close little toddler friends, weren't we? We were a trio and bumbling around and
Yeah,
playing in
we
the
absolutely were. Yeah,
mud and
I have
everything.
lots of photos of us as toddlers. And yeah, friends like that obviously have like a special place. I
Yes.
was thinking this morning, I can remember the sound of your mother's voice.
Oh,
Like
wow.
certain things are burned into your brain. Your mother had a quality of warmth that always made me feel very like loved and welcome. I was thinking about that today. And so yeah, even though we haven't seen each other in person in years, people like
Yes,
that live inside you.
absolutely. Yeah. And I remember being worldly jealous of you because you ended up with a whole bunch of little sisters and I didn't have any. So
That
there
is
you go.
very true. I am the oldest of four girls, which was a whole thing, a whole journey of growing up with a lot of loudness.
Wow. Well, it's amazing how sort of, two completely different journeys that started in the same place kind of ended up in the same place because you're in service to others in similar ways. For me, you're a life coach and what would you call it? I don't want to, box you into a life coach because it's more than that,
Yeah.
isn't it really?
Yeah, I mean, that is language that people can relate to. So when somebody wants to call me a life coach, that's totally fine. I work with people addressing all areas of their life. I'm a certified professional coactive coach, and I'm also a professional certified coach with the International Coaching Federation. Who really cares about those credentials except people in the industry? Nobody. But it matters to me because I take the professionalism piece really seriously. I take the ethics of the industry really seriously. But really, I call my business a personal development coaching business. And so, personal development, like it's all about growth, getting to know ourselves more deeply, having a deeper experience of our lives, being more authentic in our lives. And I also like to say finding home within ourselves because there's so much noise out there. I know we'll get into my story, but in the past, I sort of just took everything at face value. And I wasn't very connected to a sense of home within myself. And so in a way, a lot of my own, as most of us people in sort of the healing and helping space, I want to help people on the same journey that I was on.
Right.
So yeah.
So, speaking of that homecoming, I think that's a great place to jump off and talk about your personal story because you weren't always in this sort of field of helping. So, let's rewind and you can catch me up on, your journey. Let's say, I don't know, I guess we last saw each other in high school maybe. So,
That's
from
true.
there,
It would
where
have
did
been high
you
school.
end up? Where did you pop off to?
Yeah, we grew up together in Montreal, and my family actually moved to Toronto, Canada, right after high school, which was I was 16. That's a hard time to move and to leave everything you know and your friends. But what I found, we were talking about this earlier, I never really, really felt like I fit in where I grew up. Sometimes even in my own family, I always felt different, and I thought that that was a bad thing. I thought it was almost like a self-blaming thing. Like, why are you so different?
Hmm.
And there was always like a want to fit in. And then when I came to Toronto in a very vulnerable, 16-year-old experience, I met friends for the first time who I just really felt like, whoa, these are my people. And so it was a very expansive experience after I got over the initial, fear and tears and all of that. And when living here at 16 is sort of when I really started to develop, I think, my own sense of self and my own voice, even though maybe I was still a little bit afraid to fully embrace my authentic self. But I went to university and I did radio and television program because I am a creative. I always knew that I was meant to work in a creative field.
Hmm.
Back then, that's what was calling to me. And ultimately, I ended up working in the TV industry, even while I was in university. I was always like very much a go-getter. So any opportunity, like I would really, really go after something and make it happen. So I had an internship at a pretty prominent, it was actually a TV channel for preschoolers. And I got to work there while I was still in high school here in Toronto. And from there, like that whole world just sort of opened up to me. So I had a very long career in the Canadian television industry. Um, Eventually, here, if you want to make TV shows and be on set, you're usually going to be a freelancer working for various production companies. So over a very long span, I worked in the industry for 22 years.
Oh, wow.
I was a producer, a director. I made a lot of different types of TV shows, a lot of HGTV, Food Network type stuff. I did some kids. I did some documentary, some biography. That was some of my favorite times because I'm a storyteller. I love stories and I love people and sort of like getting a little window into people's worlds. So that I enjoyed a very long, passionate career. It wasn't all wonderful, to be honest. It's a tough industry. Um, and then until I sort of didn't love it anymore.
Okay, well, there's the key, there's the hint. So that is when my cue is to ask you, what was the catalyst? What was the crisis? What was the thing that occurred that, and that's the thing with like disruptions to our lives, right? At the time, they're like, "Oh my God, how do I deal with this thing?" And then later on, you look back and you go, "You know what? That was the thing. That was the thing." So for you and for all my guests on the show, there's always something. So,
There's
this is
always something. It's
what
true.
was your catalyst?
Yeah, the something that happens for a lot of us feels terrible while it's happening.
Yeah.
And it really, usually years later, we can look back and say, wow, that I felt like that was happening to me. And really, I can see how it was happening for me. And that was definitely my experience. But at the time, it felt terrible. And so, on the surface, I had been, like I said, a freelancer for a long time. And then for 6 years, I worked at a Canadian broadcaster, a broadcasting company, and I was a production executive overseeing shows, probably even some big familiar ones that probably a lot of people know. And to the outside, it probably looked like a dream job, and it was for the first 6 years, it was a dream job. And then the dream sort of turned to a nightmare for
Ooh.
me. Sounds dramatic, but it is actually my truth. I was really, truly suffering inside. And it wasn't just at work. I was bringing it home. I didn't like who I was being at home with my daughter and my husband. Yeah, our company went through a merger, and I was really struggling inside. And it's easy to blame it on the circumstance. Well, it's the merger, and everything is changing, and the culture is changing. But really, I had changed. I had become a mother, I think maybe just 3 years before. And at the time, I couldn't have named this, but I know that what was simmering under the surface was this deep sense that I was meant to work in a helping field. But it was so repressed, because I had a belief that, well, I didn't choose that. I didn't choose that. I'm not a therapist. I didn't choose to go that route. I'm just a creative. I remember thinking that to myself.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, in years prior, I had worked with some coaches. And I remember thinking somewhere deep inside of me, how did they get to do this? They get to do this as their job? So there's a bit of envy and like a little bit of a yearning, but I would shut it down very quickly because that's not what I chose.
Mm-hmm.
And so when sort of all of this came together, and everybody was sort of going through a hard time through this merger, I really felt like I had lost myself. The work I loved doing turned into work I didn't love it anymore. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't love even the atmosphere. I didn't love what had happened to the television industry and what I was being asked, or who I was being asked to be within it. So that's, again, sort of the surface level stuff. But I hired a coach because I met a woman. Her name is Donna McLean. And she, we all say, I think we all have that, maybe that one person or a few people who we say, that person changed my life. And she'll always say, no, you changed your life. But she cracked me open in a way that nobody ever had before. I met her at an event, and I sat down next to her, and we started having a conversation. And I remember saying to her, I feel like you're looking into my soul. And she gave me her card.
Okay.
And it's a moment when I was at work, and I was really, truly, again, I felt like I felt like it was an unreasonable amount of internal suffering given, again, I was blaming it on the circumstances, but I was thinking, why am I this misaligned? Like, what's happening inside of me? Am I
Mm-hmm.
depressed? I investigated that route with doctors. What is happening to me? And in working with Donna, she was the first person who I did some core values work with, some life purpose work with. She really helped me see myself in a way that I had never seen myself before. And she said to me, you are already a helper in the world. It's who you are. It's who you've always been. And you've been showing up this way even through your TV career.
Mm-hmm.
And so that felt like a lightning bolt going through my body when she said that. And then I got angry because that's what I do. My skeptic kind of,
Well,
well, so what are you saying?
that's part of being a manifester.
Oh, well, thank you. I definitely need to learn more about that. But
Yeah.
I know my skeptic very well. We're BFFs at this point. But
Okay.
and of course I know about myself now too. If when somebody offers something and anger comes up in me, that means, whoa, they've struck a chord. This is
Yeah.
important.
There's something that
And so
needs
I
addressing.
Absolutely. And so, I kind of at first went to like, what are you saying? I'm supposed to leave a 20-year career that I
Mm-hmm.
built? What? I'm gonna have a new career, go back to school? Like, it was a lot of fear coming up because, again, she struck a chord. It's like she opened a door that you can't close at that point. And then all the fear of, well, yeah. And she said to me, I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm just telling you what's true. I'm telling you what I see. And that was true. And so once that door was open, I could not unsee what I saw. And even looking through the lens of my core values, I was looking again in terms of the work and how I was spending my days. It wasn't aligned
No.
anymore with who I really am. And so once a person like me, I'm a deep feeler. I need to feel good in my life. And once I knew that, there was no other choice. I had to figure out what was next for me.
Right.
And so, yeah, it was a tough time. It took actually probably about a year, maybe a year and a half for me to find the courage and the right sort of pathway to making this happen. I wasn't even sure where I was going. I
Mm-hmm.
knew that I had been cracked open, and that I was meant to be a helper in the world, but I didn't know how.
Right.
But I did leave my job. I had a serendipitous run in. Serendipitous. I mean, I really do believe like it was divine timing. I went to an event and I ran into a former colleague, and he came right up to me and he said, "I have something for you. I have an interesting opportunity for you." I hadn't
Wow.
even told him that I was looking. And he offered me a job to go work with content creators, YouTubers,
Mm-hmm.
um, and which it was a world I knew nothing about. And he said, "I have a 1 year contract. Come and work with us." And it just felt like this could be a bridge. I
Right, an
really saw.
avenue to freedom because maybe it gave you other opportunities to do something, to study or to, yeah.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. I live in Toronto. It's an expensive city. You know, a lot of my blockers were sort of like, I own a home, I have a child, I have
Oh,
to be responsible. I can't just quit a job and go to nothing. You know, there was a yearning inside of me that said, wouldn't that be nice?
yeah.
But I had to, you know, I'm really big on following the yearnings, and I believe we are so resourceful. We can follow dreams and make things happen, but we also have to have an eye. We have to be realistic about it. We can't just
Mm-hmm.
close our eyes to the reality of our lives. So this to me was an opportunity. It was like a bridge, and I thought to myself, well, even if it's 1 year of doing something different, I'm going to learn some new things about myself. I really had to check my ego at the door, to be honest. It was a pay cut. It was a lot of people. I was in a production executive job. This was like, you know, maybe a lower down on the rung sort of job, but it was a completely different kind of opportunity. It was a new experience.
Wow.
And once I was in it, I actually was able, I had the time and the space. It wasn't, you know, my former job was very stressful. I had the spaciousness to actually go back to school and pursue this. You know, the coach training did become like, it was the internal whisper about following that path became louder and louder. And I never looked back.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think at some point in that journey, probably even before you ended your job, because I don't know what the exact timing was, but I remember you reaching out to me at some point. I don't know if it was like Facebook Messenger or something. And I
Mhm.
was doing some coaching at the time. And I think
Yeah.
you even asked me like, "Oh, well, what school did you go to?" And I was like, you don't really need to."
Yeah.
And I know
I
that like for
there
everyone, it's definitely
Yeah,
different. And there are, there are
absolutely.
definitely roots and
Yeah.
structures that some people prefer and enjoy. But I really do remember you reaching out and me going, uh-huh, she's in a transformation.
That's hilarious because that's how I operate. You know, it's like, again, we are all so different. And I really want to honor that. Like, whatever route is right for you is
For
right for
sure.
you. I'm someone I knew if I want to do this, I want to be able to dig in.
Hmm.
And there's something for me about like falling in love with the art of
Yeah,
something, you know? And so I wanted training that I could fall in love with.
right.
That was such a personal thing. It had less to do about what the world would think or what
Yeah, yeah.
clients would think, right? I wanted to follow. And I actually did get in touch with a lot of different people. And then when I realized that Donna, my coach, had trained at the Coactive Training Institute. And then I also realized that another coach I had worked with years before that had also been trained there. That was
Uh-huh.
sort of my clue that like, there's something for me here.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, but here's where my skeptic again. I remember before I signed up for the coach training, I called the school a whole bunch of times to make sure, can I get my money back? If I give you my money, can I get it back? What if this thing doesn't work out? So that is how I operate. I need to
Sure.
gather a lot of information to almost feel safe enough, or like I've done my due diligence before I can really just like fall back
Yeah.
into the flow of the experience.
And as you know, with working with, you're working with clients all over the world, Canada, States, Mexico, all of Europe, everywhere, basically, with all different walks of life. You also know, probably from your experience with clients, that everyone will have the thing that feels completely right for them to do to approach a problem. And that's actually what makes you good at the thing you're doing. So
Oh,
when you're following your own
true.
resonance, that's where the
Yes,
goodness comes from.
absolutely. I was just talking to a client, a potential new client yesterday, saying exactly this, that nothing can be forced in the process of working with a human being. I have tools in my toolkit just like you do, but my job really is to be so present with the human being in front of me and to find the language and the resonance in them with the different tools that we're accessing together. If it's not resonant, we're not using it.
Hmm.
We're not going to go there. Just the same that, like, in coaching, as you know, we're not telling people what to do. We're helping them find their path and their rightness inside of them, I like to say. And to do that, it has to resonate with them.
Hmm.
So it's like you're really walking hand in hand on their path with them. And they might, we're almost like they're in the forest, there's too many trees and weeds. We're helping them cut down the weeds, but we're walking right with them on
Yeah.
their own path.
Absolutely not like some other path that they're being led down. No, absolutely
Yes.
not. And
Yes.
I know a lot of your practice has to do with really embracing being human. Now, I want to
Mhm.
talk to you about that in terms of your own experience and the times that you've been maybe hard on yourself and you've learned through your own experience that like that's not going to work and not going to fly, and also how you apply that to your helping others and to your own sort of like mission or journey or purpose or theme in your life. How does being human feel?
Yeah, being human is messy. It's messy. And there's a lot of it's joy and pain and light and dark. And amazing joy and also amazing sorrow. And I say that because obviously sorrow is not amazing. We don't label it that way. But I think in a way, not directly, but I think what was modeled for me or what I was taught or what I sort of um, interpreted from growing up was that life was supposed to be easy.
Mm,
And if it was hard, something's wrong. Something's wrong with you. Something's wrong with your life. You're not doing it right. And it's really been a journey of like undoing, unlearning, and allowing the messiness of being human for me to realize that actually like to live a full life, the fullness of being human includes all of those elements even within ourselves, right? There's light parts and dark parts. There's things about ourselves we don't necessarily like. And it's actually those parts that I like to invite out of the dark when I'm working with a client so that they can learn to embrace all of their parts. And when we can do that, and I've learned this from experience, we can be more compassionate with ourselves and actually we can work better with ourselves. So, I talk a lot about like the inner critic because that's people understand that concept. And about, the goal when somebody works with me is not to get rid of that part of ourselves. It's to actually get to know it really well. The same way that I mentioned, I know my skeptic
mm-hmm,
almost like a best friend on my shoulder. And I expect that part of me to get loud,
mm-hmm.
especially when I'm about to do something new or, enter the unknown, but I now know how to work with it. In my previous life, again, I took everything at face value. I didn't realize there were different parts of me. I just
Right.
sort of thought, well, this is me. And I was very self critical. But through my entire TV career, the industry itself is already a pretty tough industry. There's a lot of egos. You're always putting out fires. There's not really a lot of time for nurturing and mentoring. You're sort of just like, doing by fire.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be a really tough industry. And, I was tough on myself through that already tough environment, which was very, very oppressive. So
Mm.
when I think of my former self, I think of being tight, controlling, perfectionism. I was scared all the time, a lot of fear.
Mm.
Um, I actually this just came to me as I was thinking about our chat today in my 20s. My sister said to me, I think you need to go see my teacher. She was at a holistic nutrition school. And I said, for nutrition? She said, no, not for nutrition. Just, I think she could help you. And with a total leap of faith, I booked an appointment to go see this. Well, I didn't even know what I was doing or what kind of
Okay.
practitioner she was. Now looking back, I actually think she probably was doing some Akashic Records work
Okay.
and a few other, more spiritual things, but I didn't care. I sort of just like fell into the arms of this woman. And she was the first person who very directly pointed out to me that she said, up until this point, all of your success, because I was successful, by outside eyes, all of your success, all of your drive has been driven by fear.
Mm.
Fear of not being good enough, fear of being inadequate,
Hmm.
and with almost this air of like trying to prove myself,
Yeah.
which which is very familiar. A lot of us can
Yeah,
relate to that.
it's that worthiness wound, you know? It's like, am I good enough to exist?
Totally, and that, but that like she that was another piercing of my soul to hear that fed back to me. And I guess I didn't realize I had any other choice.
Right.
And it was also sort of buried. I didn't realize that's how I had been operating, but I now know we do not have to operate that way. We don't have to be oppressive with ourselves and be driven by fear. That actually, when we're driven by inspiration or inner guidance, inner knowing, inner light, higher wisdom, whatever you want to call it, all of us have access to that. All of us have that inside of us. And so in my work with people now, and in the continued work that I keep doing with, in my own life and my own experience, it's about noticing when the fearful parts, when the self-critical parts are getting loud and wanting to take over and kind of drive our route in our lives, and catching it, and maybe even bringing some tenderness
Hmm.
to it and saying, oh, you are really suffering right now, like this is really tough. Usually there's like a little nugget of information in there that's helpful, and the rest
I
of
think there
it,
absolutely is. I don't think that anything that occurs in us, whether it be your body or your psyche or anything, ever occurs because it doesn't believe that it's helping us. So
I am with you.
fear
I
is
am so with you.
100% in service to you until it isn't. And at which point it
Absolutely.
isn't, it becomes suffering, you know, and then you're like, oh my God, why am I doing all these things? But up until that point, like it can be there. When you notice it though, you can't go up head and head against it. You absolutely have to invite it in to be
Yeah.
integrated to and give it that love, because if
Mm,
this fear has been serving you for the first 20 years of your life and
yeah.
today it isn't, well then you actually owe that fear a lot of gratitude before you send it on its way.
Absolutely. Yes. And I think you were even about to say the word respect. That's what I sensed.
Absolutely, there's a
There's a
wisdom in it.
poem. There's a poem by Pema Chodron. I think it's called The Fear Warrior. I send it to a lot of my clients and I read it a lot for myself. And she describes exactly that experience, that, the way to defeat fear is to actually look it right in the face and give it the respect it deserves, because
Yeah.
it is here for a reason. There's something important for you to see or hear. Give it the respect. But the way to defeat it is not to listen to its
Right.
demands, not to listen to what it has to say in terms of how the steps you're going to take to move forward.
Absolutely. And it's the same thing with any emotion, really. You have to understand your emotions are there to help you. They're there. The fear is there because it thinks that without it, something horrible is going to happen. It wants to make sure nothing ever horrible happens to you in your whole life. And so it says, avoid the horrible things all the time. But when you reclaim your knowing that actually, whether it's, getting on an elevator or speaking in public, that actually, yes, we believe now that something horrible could happen, but I'm in the driver's seat. We can slowly, gently get on the elevator. We can slowly, gently get in front of whatever and have the life we're now desiring that maybe the other day we didn't. And that's okay. Your changes, your
Absolutely.
desires change.
Yes. And, I notice a lot of people, like, again, they either want to push down the
Hmm.
yuck of being human, or they just use it as a thing, as a reason to say something is wrong with me, instead of including it in
Yeah,
like, oh, yes, this is what it is to be human. And
absolutely.
so I think as much as we get to know and befriend those fearful parts, it's really important to also recognize, whoa, there's something on the other end of the spectrum, which I like to call inner leadership. Or again, there's different language for it. Higher self, wisest self, inner teacher, the inner knowing. We all have that. And so I help people really get to know and name what that part is for them,
Hmm.
so that when we are noticing that we're in a fear spiral, we have some other resource to tether to and to navigate ourselves towards.
Absolutely. And this is a great segue to the second part of being human, which I don't think
Mhm.
is actually separate, which is, what this show is trying to share with people. It's that mystical part, that magical part, that non-physical part. And my curiosity is like, what has been your experience with coming to recognize the fullness of your being outside of like what
Mhm.
is normally associated with being human?
So I'll be honest with you. I'm excited to answer this with you and have this conversation with you because I've not really gone there before in
Mm,
any kind of public forum. I think it felt maybe too behind the doors, or especially over the last few years, as I have opened more to sort of a more spiritual side and a more pure sense of that kind of pure consciousness that all of us are. Um, it hasn't necessarily felt like something I want to talk about publicly. I think a lot of us go through that. And at
sure.
this point, I'm really finding myself at a moment in time where I just really truly want to say what's true because this can help other people. And if
Yes.
someone like me who has the biggest skeptic on my shoulder, who in my previous life was so tight and so closed off, I thought meditation wasn't for me, inner peace not for me, like not available to me. If someone like me over here on this side has been so cracked open, then anyone can be. I really feel that. And so, yeah, I'm happy to share a couple of different experiences, and then I can kind of tell you how I live my life now.
Beautiful.
And I also know that it's an ongoing journey. There's so much more that I'm excited to discover. I don't think we're ever done, especially in the spiritual sort of area of things. Um, when I was still suffering in my dark time in my TV career, my husband's uncle passed away, and we went to his funeral, and we were sitting in a church. And churches don't even really have a deep spiritual meaning for me personally, but something started happening in my body. And I was actually watching the priest, and there was a quality of how he cared, how he was caring for the family, um, that brought me to tears. And I started having like a full embodied experience that I couldn't even explain. And I started bawling my eyes out. And I thought my husband's family must think that this is strange because I didn't know his uncle that well. Of course, it was sad. We were at a funeral, but the tears that were flowing it was more of again, something had kind of cracked open inside of me. And there was a very deep sense of almost like it's not a voice that I heard, but it was like this message that surrounded me that said, you are meant to help and comfort people. You are meant to help and comfort people. And I bawled my eyes out for hours after that. My husband he didn't understand what was happening. I didn't even understand what was happening, but it just felt so big. And at that moment, it actually seemed so implausible to me that I felt a little trapped. Like, oh my
Hmm.
God, if this is what I'm meant to do, it's not what I'm doing. And so yikes, what now? Um, and then once I was in my coach training, I had sort of a second experience. Um, we were working with partners, and there was this beautiful woman. We were meant to sort of say to each other what we saw in each other, and it was a very sacred moment. And she said to me, Jenny, when I look at you, I just feel that God is here. And again, like God is a concept that I don't even have a place where I sit firmly on, but it was the way that she offered that, and it felt so pure. And again, I keep saying today, like a cracking open, like an open. And we everybody else went to lunch after that, and they said, oh, Jenny, come for lunch with us. And I was so overwhelmed, I needed to sit down, and I stayed behind by myself in the room. And I my body again started to sort of like laugh cry. I had this, like, I was crying, I was laughing, and something was happening. And all of the sudden, this is inexplicable. It was like there was a light or something opened, and I heard a message that said, receive the light. Which I swear, the me of a few years ago would be like rolling her eyes at this story. But it was undeniable. I tell you with full truth, like this happened, and it was a full embodied experience. And I do feel that was, I think I did sort of receive the light on that day, or maybe accepted that I am light, that I am the light, that it
Mhm.
is my calling to be the light in the world or for people, or to illuminate. I've now come to, in coactive coaching, we help people deepen their understanding of their life purpose with a
Mhm.
life purpose statement.
Okay.
And I believe that purpose has nothing to do with what we do for a living. We can apply it, but our purpose is already in us. We're born with the gifts that we are meant to sort of like put into the world. And so my life purpose has to do with being an illuminator. I'm an illuminator, casting light in shadowy places, allowing people to see and be seen, fully see and be seen. And I think that day when that message came to receive the light, I think that that is what I sort of, that was me accepting, okay, this is who I'm meant to be in the world. So that was, that is the first time I've ever told that story. Except for some really close relationships. And over the years, you know, again, being a person who was very like locked up and tight, I started being interested in meditation, Kundalini yoga, even in-body inquiry, embodiment, like kind of like coming into the body and getting out of here, because the brain, the mind is where we get stuck. It's like I'm an overanalyzer, like a lot of my clients, and that's what, when we overanalyze everything in life, we get very confused. Yeah. And so I learned over the years that coming inside to the quiet place inside of us, the home inside of us, the authentic us, that is where like all becomes quiet and the noise from outside kind of like fades away. And that's where we can hear these internal whispers of truth.
That's really beautiful.
It's what I've lived, you know, like it really is what I've lived. And then, you know, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer was a book that somebody bought me. And for years I'd pick it up and it wasn't resonating with me and I'd put it back on the shelf. And then it was actually last summer, I picked it up and finally it really felt like, whoa, his message is truth. It felt like truth, which is, for me, what I really took away from it is this idea, the idea that we can be the witness of our humanness. That there is you know, who are we? Inside of ourselves, there is a consciousness that can actually witness our human tendencies. Like, you know, again, oh, there I go again, being a perfectionist, trying to control the way my daughter's cleaning her room, and now I'm all riled up. Like, there I go again. But the me that's witnessing that is not that behavior. And so this was like kind of revolutionary for me to read, because I realized like it was putting words to something that I was actually experiencing, but I didn't understand that I was experiencing that.
Wow.
So I love, you know, Michael Singer talks about opening and closing. And I use mindful self-compassion in my work, and where we also talk about opening and closing the heart intentionally. And he really helped me see that when I can sit in that seat of witness and witness my human tendencies, I actually have some agency there. I don't have to be, my reactivity doesn't have to run my life, that I can take that extra breath, come inside. And when I feel that my heart is closing because somebody said something that's triggered me, I can actually tell myself, wait, don't close, stay open, stay open. Or if it feels unsafe, okay, close, but close intentionally.
Right, yeah.
And that's been a very new, in the last year or so, way of operating.
And it's beautiful because in that way, you truly get to know yourself, right? Like, so from the perspective of like, I don't know, Vagary, who I channel, or higher wisdom or something, we are not our personalities at all. Like, that's just a costume you got given. And if you get a little bit confused and you start to think you're actually made out of cotton and synthetic fibers, like that can be a very weird experience, right? Like you're not the costume. But if you can remember that you get to play that role, you get to play that game of being yourself, then you also understand how unbelievably precious it is that you got the costume you got, with its quirks and its foibles and its imperfections and its hangups and its triggers. And, you know, we give such negative connotations to having these things, right? Habits, let's say, or whatever it is. And if you're going to actually want to make or take some sovereignty in your life and actually go, okay, I want to have this particular experience the way I want to have it, then the first step is absolutely going, oh, okay, I have a tick or whatever, or I have this thing that I'm not in preference to. And it's okay. It's okay. Because every time you're
Yeah.
aware of it, you can then go, okay, now I'm aware of it. And now I can choose if that's a problem or not. And if it's not, okay, you're just like
Yes, and
anybody else.
I love this. This again, it's like it just feels like we are speaking truth.
Yeah.
And the other piece that mindful self-compassion has taught me is that when that happens and we're noticing that we're judging that part of
Hmm.
us, that's where we can say, wait, judging it doesn't work. It
No.
just leads me down a negative path. What if I embrace it? And
Hmm.
you can even speak to that part that, that tick that you have, ooh, or the part of you that's judging it. This is really hard for you. It's
Yeah.
really hard for you to operate in the world with this and to feel different. And you know what? That makes sense. It's like I have my hand on my heart because that's what mindful self-compassion has taught me, to have my hands on my heart at all times. But that's what we can be, our own source of support and soothing, to say,
Yes.
oh, you poor baby, you poor human. It's not easy to operate in a world where you have this difference,
Yeah.
but it's okay.
Yeah.
And that's the way that we would treat someone else.
A
And so,
child, exactly. It's the way you would,
absolutely.
if you had the capacity to, because unfortunately even adults don't always have the capacity to have that compassion. But when you have the capacity, that's a superpower. Your inner being actually wants that, it wants that understanding and it wants that compassion, and it doesn't want to lean on the overeating, or it doesn't want to lean on the forever scrolling or whatever. But the moment you have compassion for yourself, that is the thing that's serving you until it doesn't, you get much quicker to the end of that serving you, because what you really wanted all along
Absolutely.
was the acceptance. So it's
Yeah.
really beautiful.
And in that moment, you're allowing yourself intentionally,
You're aware of
consciously.
it. Yes, absolutely.
I am choosing this thing. Okay, is it the best coping or is it the best soothing mechanism?
No.
Probably not. However, it's what I'm choosing in this moment.
And it's
And
what I'm
right,
available to in this moment. And
yeah,
then, but on top of that, that added bonus of you going, I am allowed to be imperfect, and I am
yes,
allowed to be doing the best I can do for today. And
yes,
tomorrow, because I did my best today, my best will be a little bit better. I don't need to beat myself up to get
absolutely.
there. Yeah.
Yes, in those, and we don't have to make up stories that, oh, now I've opened this door to, like, as
No,
you said
no.
before, now I'm going to be addicted. No, it's all about bringing consciousness to
Yeah.
that, like making the conscious choice. And my sister-in-law, who is deeply ingrained in my soul, she's like a soul sister. We run a self-compassion retreat together. She is my teacher of mindful self-compassion. She gave me a phrase that I say a lot to myself and to other people, which is, how human of me.
Yes.
How human of you. And that's okay, because again, the human experience means that it's messy, we have flaws, we're imperfect. And when we can embrace all of that, we don't have to fight it
Yeah.
anymore and and again, be so critical of ourselves.
Which also is human too. So there's layers. So if you are out there
Yes.
judging yourself and going, I'm not good enough and I'm not able to do that yet, don't worry. Today you'll do a little bit, tomorrow you do a little bit more, and that's not a problem. And you can also just
Exactly.
do none of it. I'm always sharing with my clients, you can, and this is also a Vagrian thing, right? We have the free will to not align with our inner being. Okay, free will
Mhm.
only lasts as long as you're not aligning, because the moment you surrender into who you deeply are, you don't have a choice. You're just going with
Mhm.
what's being called through you. And that is when those voices, like the ones that you heard, are like, this is your calling, this is your mission. You can resist that. You can, do
Yeah.
the thing that doesn't feel good for a long time. But the
Yeah.
moment you surrender into it, you kind of go, you know what? This is what it always was. This is who I
Yes.
always
It's
was.
so
There's really,
true.
why
It's
was
so
I
true.
fighting? That made no sense.
Yeah, it's true. And actually, as you're speaking, I'm even thinking about, now with all this knowledge, and I'm assuming it's likely similar for you. I'm here now running a business, something I had never done before.
Hmm.
Again, it was a blocker for me until I allowed myself to just figure it out as I went.
Hmm.
But here I am running a business. There's a lot of aspects to it at this point. And my fear and judgment comes up a lot.
Hmm.
Sometimes even again that need to prove myself to other people.
Right.
But I have so much awareness of it
Yeah.
now that I can work with it in a different way. And do I always work with it perfectly? No, I do not.
No.
But one thing that also I'm really committed to this year in particular is trusting the red flags or the alarm bells inside of myself. So again,
Right.
trusting my gut, which
Hmm.
is always important for all of us. But I've realized, even through running a business, whenever something feels like a red flag for me, and
Yeah,
I feel it in my body,
you
we
do. Yeah.
do. I will not ignore it. I won't.
Right.
And like something came up recently in my business world that had a red flag attached to it. And I actually thought to myself, wow, people on the other side of this might think I'm being difficult, or they
Hmm.
might think like, what's wrong with her? Which is my biggest trigger, right?
Right.
And I even had an email that said, well, you're the only one who is,
Right.
has complained about this thing. And that had, for a second, I said, whoa, my that has me. That's my trigger right there. You're the only one. So something must be wrong with you.
Right.
But I know I'm committed right now to listening to the red flags. They are there for a reason.
Yep.
So I decided in that moment, I'm not going to spiral down that path of what's wrong with me. I'm going to look at what's right with me. And
Hmm.
what's right with me is I got to trust my gut.
Yeah.
And so that is sort of how I am operating in the world and in my business at this
That's
moment in time.
beautiful. I love that. And to add to that, there's always the option to wait and see, right? I think that people don't give themselves enough space to go,
Mhm.
okay, I'm not going to take action on this thing or agree to this person or go down that alleyway or whatever it is that's bringing up the thing.
Yeah.
And if they call me crazy, if they say I'm difficult, if they're whatever, 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 it's okay because I am allowed the space and time to wait and see. And if I'm right about this red flag, it will unfold all by itself. It is going to unfurl with the next gust of wind, and I'm going to
Yeah.
see whether or not I was right. And if I was wrong, okay, okay.
Yeah.
But the truth
Yeah.
is, I haven't put myself in a position where I've betrayed my inner feeling, which is huge.
Woo! Yes, the
Yeah,
betrayal of self.
yeah.
Something did happen about a year ago where I chose to betray myself.
Hmm.
And the funny thing is, on the surface, everybody moves through whatever happens and you move on. You're the one that suffers with the betrayal of
Yeah,
self. That
yeah.
lingers inside of you for a really long time. And that was how I decided it's not worth it. I don't
Perfect.
want to live with that sense of betrayal of self. And so yeah, I won't do that again.
No, you learned
And
it.
maybe I will, and how human of me, and then I'll just learn the lesson again.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. So, what does the word mystic mean to you now? What did it mean before when you were a skeptic? Let's talk about that a
Yeah.
bit.
I've heard you ask that to other people, and I was hoping you would ask me. It's like an exciting question for me, because I'll just share. The other day, I was with a client of mine, and she asked me, "What are your big dreams? Like, what's your vision for the future?" And I said to her, "I don't know if you're gonna like the answer. I think like I sensed she was waiting for some big, inspiring answer." Um, and I said, the truth is, I don't really have like 5-year plans or some huge vision because I need to believe in this quality of magic or mysticism, of a path opening up as I walk it. That feels so much more authentic to me than trying to it's nothing wrong with dreaming. I help people dream all the time. But it's for me, I know where I'm headed sort of like energetically. I know where I'm headed, but I don't know the picture of what that looks like. And I'm okay with that. In fact, I actually need that because that involves a little bit of mysticism, a little bit
Hmm.
of mystery, a little bit of ooh, what's going to come, who's going to come, what opportunities might open up. And I think the more that I trust my body, my internal guiding system, my gut, those whispers inside of me, that's how I know, oh, that's how you're going to know if you're on the right path.
Yeah.
So the word mystic is exciting to me, and it's a quality that I think I need to have in my life, especially at this moment in my life and work, where it's just this exciting, who knows what's going to happen or who knows what's going to come, and I'm all for it.
Well, I love that coming from an ex-perfectionist because that is like the
Yeah.
opposite of having all the boxes
Yeah.
ticked and the ducks in the row and all that stuff. So that's really a beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful description of that.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Where
I
can,
will say,
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. Operating from a perfectionist, like from my inner perfectionist, when I let that part of me drive my life, it was really yucky, because the truth is we can't control outcomes really 100% anyway. And that was all fear-based. It was
Right.
all fear. And so it's very freeing to be rid of my inner perfectionist. Again, does it pop up sometimes? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm so aware of it now.
Yeah.
And I will say the book, The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown is one I recommend all the time to my clients and other people.
Beautiful. Yeah. I hope someone picks that up if it feels like it's in resonance with them. Yeah. And so now your life, does it feel like it's cooperating with you more than when you were trying to control it?
That's a great question. Yeah, the truth is things happen. Okay. Like I've been through hard things like everyone else, really, truly hard things, especially in the last couple of years. I've had some challenging family stuff, um, some traumas, just like the rest of us, because that is what it is to live a human life. And at the same time, I trust that I am held by life, which again might sound a little woo woo, but it's the truth inside of me. And actually when I am struggling, because when we're in those moments where something happens and we're struggling, you kind of forget what you know. Like it's easy to, you sort of really get roped into the problems of it all and the pain of it all. And again, my sister-in-law Amy, who is like, I believe she is like a guide in my life, she said to me recently, Jenny, do you trust that you've always been held by life? And when she said that, like the answer is yes. It's a big yes in my body. And so that is, no matter what happens and things happen and it's not all wonderful and beautiful, I believe that I'm held. And self-compassion actually allows me to hold myself through those painful moments to soothe myself. And so, yeah, I am trusting the unfolding of my life. And that's actually a mantra. It's a bit of a phrase that came to me when I was doing the mindful self-compassion. I did an 8-week course. That was something that really came up strong for me. Trust the unfolding of your life. It's what I want for myself. It's what I feel is right. And so, yeah, I have a lot more trust.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love it. I love it. I love it. So tell us where people can find you and what kind of projects you have coming up.
Yeah, you can find me on my website, jennytryansky.ca or .com. And I do use social media. You can find me on my Instagram or Facebook. It's at Jenny Tryansky Coaching. You can link with me on LinkedIn. I like to meet people on there. I've actually had random people get in touch with me on there. Some of them have become clients. Some of them have become friends. I'm a very relational person. I always have been. I love human beings. I love people. And so I always welcome anybody to get in touch with me if you're interested in my work or you just want to have a conversation. I do lead a self-compassion retreat with my beautiful sister-in-law, Amy. We are beautiful co-leaders. We're very different. And yet when we come together, there's this quality of magic that is just undeniable. The next one is in September 2024, and it's September 13th, 13th and 14th in Prince Edward County, Ontario. You don't have to live in Canada to join us. Last year, we had a group of women who came from Chicago. This year, I have people flying across the country. It's a very, very special experience. It is a weekend that is based in mindful self-compassion because, again, I just believe it's this going inside that kind of allows us to heal. And in safe spaces and safe groups, what I notice is people just want to be witnessed and they want to be seen. And that in itself is healing. And so I'm very excited about that. I've been doing over the last year these free virtual sessions that I'm calling Learn and Connect, because that's what I love, bringing people together to learn and connect with each other. I love facilitating spaces where people can be raw and real and honest and take the masks off. And so I'm trying to offer those experiences for free whenever I can. I just led one the other day where I actually guided the group through a tool or an exercise in self-compassion that helps us have inner strength in tough moments. But I've also done some fun topics. I'm always changing up the topics. And so if you're interested, please join me for one of those. You can sign up for my newsletter where you find out about that. Yeah, and private coaching is like my passion, my bread and butter. I also do employee well-being workshops. I do some private workshops. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you for all those offerings. You truly are bringing light to the world and having people come home to their humanity. I love all of that. So thank you so much for coming on Some Kind of Mystic, Jenny. I have had such a great time catching up with you and hearing all about your adventures, your enlightenment, if I dare say it, and
you can dare. Thank you.
and everything that's coming up for you in the future. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a very special experience for many different reasons, and I'm really, really grateful to you. I'm so happy to know you and to still know you after all these years.
Yeah, let's not say how many.
We won't say how many.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Some Kind of Mystic podcast. If you're hearing this message, you've listened all the way to the end of this episode, and for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's people just like you that keep me motivated to bring you more and more enlightened content to the world. If you have any questions about the things we covered in the show or would like to follow my projects, please find me on www.jpherman.com. I answer all my messages, so don't hesitate to reach out. You can also find me on Instagram, and the details are in the show notes.
Little known fact is before I had my daughter, my husband and I, we were big foodies, like really, really into food and recipes and like coming up with interesting and inventive ideas on what to kind of like create together. And we wrote a food blog together. So that was, I had for a brief moment in time before I had my daughter, it was a creative outlet that my husband and I were able to do together. We got invited to restaurant openings, and sometimes we'd have like things sent to our house. The doorbell would ring and there'd be a box of like interesting food that was sent to us because people were hoping we'd write about it in our blog. And it was just this really fun, funny moment in time where we were like food bloggers for maybe like 5 minutes, and until we couldn't do it anymore because life got too busy.
Right. Well, it's good because you get to wear all the different costumes. I love that. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh.